What if I told you that the Nile River is older than the Alps, older than the Himalayas, older than almost every mountain range on Earth you can name? Scientists always believed this river was young, a newcomer, born just a few million years ago. But new research buried deep inside the Earth's mantle has just shattered that theory completely. The Nile may be 30 million years old, older than most primates, older than the split between humans and apes, a river that was already flowing before Egypt, before the pyramids, before humanity itself existed. And today, we're going to find out how a river that ancient, flowing through the harshest desert on the planet, became the reason an entire civilization was born. For over a century, geologists agreed on one thing about the Nile. It was young. A river shaped somewhere between 5 and 6 million years ago, when tectonic shifts finally opened a path for water to reach the Mediterranean. That was the story. Clean, simple, settled. Until a team of geophysicists started asking a much stranger question. Not when did the Nile start flowing, but why has it never stopped? Why through ice ages, through shifting continents, through the slow death of ancient lakes across Africa, has this single river always found its way north? Always, without fail. The answer they found wasn't sitting on the surface. It was sitting hundreds of kilometers beneath it, inside the slow churning rock of the Earth's mantle. And it rewrote everything we thought we knew about the world's longest river. Deep beneath East Africa, there's a process most people never think about. The Earth's mantle isn't solid rock sitting still. It moves. Slowly. Like an unbelievably thick, unbelievably slow conveyor belt, dragging heat and material across thousands of kilometers over millions of years. Around 30 million years ago, this underground conveyor belt began pushing upward beneath a region we now call the Ethiopian Highlands. And it didn't stop. Bit by bit, millimeter by millimeter, an entire highland region was lifted skyward. Not by an earthquake, not by a single violent event, but by a force so slow that no living thing could have ever felt it happening. This created something extraordinary, a permanent tilt in the land. A downward slope running from the highlands of Ethiopia all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. And once gravity has a slope like that to work with, it never lets go. For 30 million years, water flowing down from those highlands has had exactly one direction to travel. North. Always north. Mountains have crumbled. Ice ages have come and gone. Entire lakes across Africa have dried into dust and vanished from the map completely. But the Nile's path, carved into the tilt of that ancient uplift, never changed. This is the discovery that stunned researchers. The river isn't just old, it's anchored, locked into a geological groove so deep, so permanent, that almost nothing on the surface of the Earth could ever redirect it. Which raises an unsettling question. If the mantle beneath Ethiopia created this slope over 30 million years, what happens if that same slow-moving force ever shifts again? We'll come back to that, because before we go further, we need to understand something else. The river that flows today isn't quite the same river that first appeared 30 million years ago. If you're enjoying uncovering these hidden mechanics of our planet, take a second to hit subscribe. Here's where the story gets stranger. If the Nile's ancient origins trace back 30 million years, its modern form, the river you'd actually recognize on a map today, is shockingly young. For decades, scientists believed the Nile as we know it, flowing steadily into Egypt, only began around 5 to 6 million years ago, when a channel finally broke through to the Mediterranean. But even that river wasn't the one that built Egypt. The Nile you're picturing right now, where the White Nile and Blue Nile merge into one unstoppable force, only came together around 10,000 years ago. 10,000. That means for millions of years, separate lakes, separate rivers, and disconnected water systems existed across East Africa in isolation. Some flowing, some stagnant, some vanishing entirely during brutal dry periods. Then, as the last ice age ended and Africa's climate shifted one final time, these fragmented water systems began to connect. Lake spilled into lake, channel merged into channel. Slowly, a single unified river emerged from the chaos, and it followed the exact same 30-million-year-old downward slope that had already been carved into the land. In other words, the Nile didn't just appear once. It was built, broken, rebuilt, and finally locked into its modern shape right around the same time humans were learning to farm. That timing is not a coincidence, because the moment this river stabilized, flowing reliably, year after year, into a desert that had almost no rainfall of its own, something remarkable became possible. A civilization with no business existing suddenly had everything it needed to survive. Before we go further into how this single river built an empire that lasted 3,000 years, if you're enjoying uncovering these hidden mechanics of our planet, take a second to hit subscribe. It genuinely helps this channel keep making deep dives like this one. All right, let's get back to the desert, too.
Picture Egypt without the Nile for a moment. Just sand, just heat. A wasteland stretching in every direction, incapable of feeding a single village, let alone a civilization that would build monuments still standing 4,500 years later. So how did it happen? Every single summer, monsoon rains slammed into the Ethiopian Highlands. The same highlands lifted by that ancient mantle uplift millions of years earlier. That water thundered down toward Egypt, and the Nile swelled far beyond its banks. To the people living along its shores, this flood wasn't a disaster, it was salvation, because when the water finally receded, it left behind something priceless. A thin, dark, mineral-rich layer of silt. The Egyptians called it Kemet, the Black Land. And it was, without exaggeration, the most fertile soil on the planet. On this soil, wheat and barley grew in staggering abundance. Enough surplus food to feed a population far larger than the desert should have ever allowed. And where there's surplus food, there's population growth, there's specialization. There are people who no longer need to farm, because someone else is growing enough for everyone. There are scribes, priests, soldiers, architects. There's an empire, but food alone doesn't build a civilization. It needs one more thing: movement. With no real roads and no wheeled transport suited to desert terrain, the Nile became something else entirely. A 600-mile highway of water, cutting straight through the world's most hostile desert. Grain, gold, stone, weapons. All of it moved effortlessly by boat up and down the river, connecting a kingdom that would have otherwise been fractured into isolated, starving settlements. And when the pharaoh needed to crush a rebellion in the south or move an army north to defend the delta, the river carried them there, fast enough to hold a fragile empire together before it could ever tear itself apart. This is the part almost nobody expects. Even the pyramids, those impossible mountains of stone, owe their existence to this river. The massive limestone blocks used to build Giza weren't hauled overland across brutal desert terrain. They were floated, loaded onto barges during flood season, when the Nile's rising water carried them directly to the construction site, sometimes right up to the foot of the pyramid itself. And during those same flood months when farmland disappeared underwater and fields sat useless, the pharaoh had an entire idle workforce with nothing to do. So he gave them something to do. Historians believe this, not slavery, but seasonal labor, is how tens of thousands of farmers ended up building the most awe-inspiring structures in human history. Paid, fed, and organized by a state that only existed because of the river's rhythm. But a river this powerful couldn't just feed people and move goods. It needed to be managed, predicting the flood, storing the water, cutting channels to carry it toward fields the river itself could never reach. This required planning on a scale no single village could handle alone. It required something new in human history, a centralized government. One authority, controlling one system, for the benefit of an entire nation, stretched along a single ribbon of water for over 600 miles. And whoever controlled that system, controlled everything. This is where the story turns almost hauntingly clever. The Egyptians didn't just rely on the Nile, they worshipped it. They believed the river was a god named Hapi, a divine force who granted life to the desert out of pure mercy. And the pharaoh didn't just rule the people. He claimed to control the flood itself. Every year, when the water rose exactly on schedule, as it almost always did, it wasn't seen as a natural cycle rooted in monsoon rains 1,200 miles away in Ethiopia. It was seen as proof that the pharaoh held divine favor, proof that questioning him meant questioning the God who kept the desert alive. Religion, food, trade, and power all fused into a single self-reinforcing system built entirely around the predictable rhythm of one river. And that rhythm held for over 3,000 years, longer than the Roman Empire, longer than almost any civilization in human history. All because 30 million years ago, deep beneath the surface of the earth, a slow-moving current of rock tilted a highland just enough to send water rushing toward a desert that had no business supporting life at all. We've traveled through 30 million years of mantle movement, through the reshaping of an entire river system just 10,000 years ago, and through the rise of an empire that turned a lifeless desert into the cradle of civilization. What's remarkable isn't just that Egypt survived here. It's that Egypt could only exist because of a chain of events set in motion long before humans ever walked the earth. A slope carved by the planet itself, waiting millions of years for someone to finally take advantage of it. The Nile didn't just witness the birth of Egypt. It wrote the blueprint. If you want to keep uncovering the hidden forces shaping our planet's greatest civilizations, make sure you're subscribed, and I'll see you in the next one.